of both professionals and peers. So our first panelist is Mr. Thomas Koh, who's a PSS. We also have Dr. Radia from Club Hill. But she'll also be sharing a bit about her experience in caregiving. Yeah, so she'll be sharing her professional and also her personal experience. If you're comfortable, yeah, sure, a bit. No, if you're not, it's okay. Up to you. That's the thing about peer support. It's okay, to share whatever you're comfortable with. When you're all standing, I sit lah. And then we also have Ying Ying, who presented earlier. And I think she talked about a paper that she wrote, which is very valuable to us in Singapore. And I hope we will have more of this. We also have Dr. Hari Ram, who is also the founder of Miss Geraldine A. She's from Oracle, and she's very and also very supportive of the Beyond the Label campaign, right? Yeah. Okay. And finally, we have Deborah, who is a volunteer to our a second time founder of CPSS, and also an active mental advocate. Okay. Yeah, I give all. I think we also have one mic for the audience to ask questions later. This is why you need pockets. Okay. So today we'll be talking about the value of lived experiences across different sectors. So not just in healthcare, not just in social services in the community, but also in the corporate sector, which is why Geraldine is here today. I've introduced the panelists, but I'll also go through one round and they will introduce themselves. Maybe something about yourself that people don't know. No, not here. Yeah, something interesting about yourself. So we just go down. Start with Thomas.
Interesting about myself. I guess I'm actually the last member of the family, but I'm actually the first twin in the chopper. And there's a lot of background that a lot of people don't know. But I guess I'll reveal more later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Reveal what?
So many of you guys actually know that I'm working as a PSS and NAPS. So in order to be a PSS and NAPS, you must have some drug taking history. So that's all.
Okay. So stay tuned for more. Okay. Dr. Radia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Radia Salim. Nothing much to say, I'm actually a GP. And I guess the reason I started Club Hill was because of things that happened to me and to my family members and relatives, because mental illness is very strong in my family. So even now, I'm actually a caregiver to my sister who has schizophrenia. She's now 69. She's had schizophrenia since when she was 18 years old.
Thank you, Dr. Radia, for sharing something so personal like that. Ying Ying.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Ying Ying. Okay, fun fact, I learned Chinese first before I learned English. So my first language is actually Chinese. And trivia, I failed English when I was in primary school.
Now her English is so good, right? Yeah, so don't worry about your PSLE results. Dr. Hari.
Hi, I work in IMH. I work in emergency services where we see people in crisis and we help them through. I always have the passion to make sure that I try and help people at their home as best as I can. At the same time, the task that I have is a difficult task too. Balancing the risk, making sure that no life is lost. I find that a bit challenging too. What many of you may not know, but some of my close friends know, is that my brother has schizophrenia. My mom does very hard work back home in India. So that kind of instilled that passion. So I have that, seeing my family supporting my brother and my own medical college professor looking after my brother. And that experiences makes me feel a bit more than just be a consultant to your patients. And I see them as my brotherhood, my sisterhood. So that's perhaps something I want to share. So that instilled me to set up Club to Care to support Indian community in Singapore. When I came here, I know SAMH, Anglican Community Services, and then Radhia. They've all been doing a wonderful job in supporting their respective community. But what about Indians? And I asked the question, maybe a bit of guilt in me, leaving my brother back home to my mom's hand, coming and working overseas, earning more money. That also instilled that I should do something for people here, locally in Singapore, for our Indian community. So that's the starting journey. And then I don't know how many of you heard Lalita, beautiful lady who did a Bharatanatyam, she portrayed schizophrenia through her dance. And she came along and she said, see, someone approached me in IMH and said, Hari Ram, I need to talk to you. Let's do something about developing a service for our Indian community. So that's our starting journey. And Radhia has been pushing me, come on Hari, you have to do something. So I think that's how the journey started. Now I have to say, although we don't have any funding, we have people who have the will and passion. So Club to Care is gradually developing now. So we'll be working with NCSS as well as AAC. Once we have funding, I want to see peers in my team leading, the professionals leading that movement for our community.
Thank you, Dr. Hari Ram.
If I take too much time, you may have to stop me.
Don't worry, I will. Yeah, because we have time limit, right? But no, thank you for sharing that. I think what we are seeing here is like our own mental health professionals sharing their personal experiences. So again, lived experiences but in caregiving. And you see how powerful it is because it translates into the work that they do. And I think we also wanted to have a very diverse panel today representing different communities because there are a lot of gaps that still need to be addressed. So I'm very glad that Club Care was started, there's Club Heal. Of course, there's still a lot more to be done, but yeah, we wanted to have this diversity on the panel because that is important so that nobody gets left behind. Yeah. So Geraldine, about yourself.
Yes, I'm Geraldine, I'm from Oracle. I do not have really interesting stories. I consider myself as an ally to those who are going through or have been through mental health condition. My role in Oracle is to really look at diversity and inclusion. It's not really my hard KPI, you call it, but I kind of convince and influence my management to let me look into this because it's my passion, especially not to leave people behind, people who may be easily overlooked or forgotten. So I'm glad that our Oracle has given me this opportunity to support our fellow colleagues. Yeah.
We are very glad that Oracle is doing this as well. I think keywords that we've been hearing: diversity, inclusion, and passion. Deborah?
Hey, there's something that I missed out which I wanted very much to share just now. Concerning every session that I have with my psychiatrist, Dr. Purnima, I just feel that there is always that equal power, which is not always the case, right? I mean, most of the persons in recovery know that. But in every session that I have with her, there is an equal power distribution in the sense that she will not be the one telling me that, okay, you just have to take this medication, this and that. But she will take into consideration every feedback that I give, like my concerns about certain side effects and all. So I think with this equal power, so to speak, this collaboration and all, I think it is a main factor that has helped in my recovery because she honors me as the expert to my recovery and she takes into consideration every feedback that I give. And of course, from the point of the person in recovery, the client, I have to be very honest in my communication so there is that clear communication. I think that is what works.
Yeah, clear communication and what Deborah mentioned was also shared decision making. Because that's what my psychiatrist and me also do. And I think that's very powerful. To always consult the person you are treating about the treatment that they need, because they would know themselves best. Okay, so we've had a very interesting introduction. We will now move to our first question. Okay, so the first question is, what's peer support in recovery? Because not everyone here might know what peer support is, or even might want to find out more about recovery and maybe even recovery principles. So that's the first question, and I'm opening it up to all the panelists. But you might want to discuss it based on your different settings, the unique settings that you have. Yeah, I think Ying, you also mentioned a bit about the background of peer support in Singapore. So you might want to start with telling us what is peer support and recovery.
Okay, I'm a researcher, right? And actually I've been thinking a lot about peer support and trying to operationalize what it means and like trying to build a conceptual framework around it. I'm working with Faith as well, another peer support specialist in the IMH to do that. So in the context of mental health, I think peer support is the intentional sharing of lived experience to other people. It could be peers, could be professionals, to provide support and also instill hope. So this is how I would distill, if I had one sentence to describe what peer support is.
Okay, what about we will go to Thomas later because another PSS. But maybe we want to hear from also the professionals. What do you think about recovery? Because I understand there's the clinical definition of recovery. Then there's, the working definition that we use in peer support.
Textbook definition is very different to the individual's definition. But perhaps what we learn through training and also hearing from people and seeing them through that journey, I think it's a journey. Recovery is a journey. It has its successes and setbacks, but it's a forward journey, and that's what perhaps recovery is about. It enables a person to have the capacity to learn and grow. Don't waste the sufferings. Every suffering should teach us something. And it's propelled us to be a learner. So we grow with that learning too. And that's perhaps key for me. That learning then enables you to become independent and somebody who's been able to lead autonomous living through the challenges that life throws to us. So being able to meet the challenges that we all face, every one of us, be a sufferer or a provider, or all of us have challenges too. And being able to have the fulfillment of our roles that we ought to play, be a student or be a worker or be a boss. And the relationships come along the way. So do we have meaningful relationships? So all these things put together. But for me, it's a journey. There are times you are a bit ahead, and there are times you have a setback, but it continues to move, and we grow along the way.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harun. Dr. Radia, your thoughts on recovery and peer support, because Kabi also has peer support specialists, right? Yeah.
Okay, I agree with Dr. Hari that it is a journey, and it's also unique journeys because everyone is different. So apart from it being unique to every person, it's also a whole village concept because it doesn't take just one person, two person, it's the whole village, it's the whole kampong hill, we call it. We are club hill, but we are like a village, and everyone plays a part. And apart from the recovery of peers, to me, peers also signify caregivers. There are peer caregivers out there, and caregivers too need to go through their own recovery journeys, so that still the most important people in the life of peers are their own family members and caregivers mostly. So that's it. It's a recovery journeys and whole village concept and supportive environment, non-judgmental. Everyone lifting. We're just uplifting. Wonderful place where you feel accepted, and you just continue to grow. So whether in Klapi, whether you're a peer or you're non-peer, you grow. The whole club grows, the whole kampong grows together, and so it is always a win-win situation.
Yeah, so we don't really have kampongs in Singapore anymore, but we have the complex spirit. And like Dr. Radia mentioned, everyone has a role to play. Everyone here has fun. So don't think like we have to do anything. That's not concern me, right? But I think we can all do something from where we are with what we have. And I think Dr. Radia mentioned this, involving the kampong in someone's recovery. I think the quote that comes to my mind is, illness is I, wellness is me. Yeah. Okay, so Thomas, do you want to tell us a bit about recovery and peer support?
Sure. First of all, I think in a local context, in Singapore, I think addiction is a very misunderstood condition. So first, I need to actually convince that addiction is a mental disease. If you are able to actually accept this fact, then it will be easier for the peer, for the medical professional expert, for them to actually treat the peer or include myself. So maybe I give a bit of my background.
Okay, before we go into that, right, since you are in this now, we will get Thomas to share his recovery story, right? So yeah, we will go into that now. So, talking about your background, right? Do you want to share with us like one childhood experience that you had?
Sure. For me, I came from a very poor family in Singapore. The first thing that I know that is I'm staying in a rented flat, and my father is a gambling addict. So as a gambling addict, the weekend, Saturday, Sunday is actually an important day for my father. Horse racing, mahjong. These are the things that he gamble with. And as a kid, we are so fearful that he will come back, lose money, and every weekend we will have, table overturned, plates flying around, and he will start to abuse us physically. So the abuse is not just, the caning, the asking you to stand in one corner. No, the abuse is more of the real punches, the real kicks. And at times, he will have getting a chopper and run after us. And I've seen my own brother being thrown in Gang River. So these are the things that my father did to us. And the longest time I'm not going to school because of the physical abuse is almost 1 month. I can't go to school. So I will have a uniform being cut away, books being thrown away because in Chinese, books are soup, and in Hokkien is losing money. So it is up to this extent he was so superstitious that we are not supposed to read a book at home, not to study at home. If not, we are trying to curse him. And only in adulthood then I realized this is called adverse childhood experience.
Okay, so Thomas, now you've shared one experience that you had. It's not easy to share this, so I want to acknowledge you and affirm you for sharing. I think when we spoke, you also mentioned like certain miracles that you had encountered. So do you want to share like the miracles that you had?
Sure. It is actually through recovery, through the peers that when I was actually warded in Institute of Mental Health, one of the addiction ward, those peers that came in during the weekend telling us recovery is possible, telling me that you are not alone fighting this disease. And when I actually heard story about people having HIV positive, having amputation of the limbs, and they still choose to live their life free from drugs. This is where I think I can create my own miracle. And because of drug use, I'm a divorcee. Because of drug use, I'm a bankruptcy. Because of drug use, I have a lot of medical problems within me. But then when in recovery, good things happen. So this is where I start to see hope in my situation.
And Thomas is now holding the hope for others because he's working as a PSS. So do you want to share like maybe a few messages that you have for people who are probably like going through something similar that you experienced?
First thing first, we have to understand that we need to preserve our own life. Because at many times, when you are going through all this pain, all this suffering, alone, many of times the thought of suicide coming. And you know, when my ex-wife decided that she had enough of me, you know, I was standing at the window trying to jump out from 21st story. And I realized, you know, if I do not have that guts to make that last step, jumping out the window, what is there left for me to do? I asked myself this question the whole night, contemplating whether to jump or not to jump out of the window. So when I decided that, you know, I have no guts to end my life, the only thing to do is recovery.
So what I'm hearing is how you transform your pain into your purpose. Yeah. And you talked about starting with ourselves. I think that is something that PSS really emphasize and focus on. Starts with ourselves so that we can help someone else in their recovery journey. I think you shared on my stage, right? Do you also want to share how you overcame stigma? And I think your work now as a PSS supporting others.
I think first, in order to remove the stigma, you need to actually remove that self-stigma that I have for myself. This is where, you know, you start to relearn everything that you believe. I start my life at the age of 39. I relearn everything. I start to believe that richness is not how much I have, but how much, you know, some other people quoted say, how much you can give. To me is how much thoughts I invested in my life. Because I have not much in my pocket these days. Yeah. The only thing that I can give is the thoughts, is the love, is the strength that the lived experience that I go through in my life.
Sometimes it's very, sometimes it's the only thing you need to, give someone else. A lot of times we don't know what to do to help someone else. But like Thomas said, the presence, the love, we should never forget that because we are human beings first.
Can I add just one?
Yeah, sure.
You know, Thomas has experience of a specialist. We know him, has gone through this journey, now his success. I know him as my badminton buddy. And you know, I am a champion for last year's competition.
Oh yes, we remember.
Thomas and his I try very hard. I can't beat him.
Keep trying. Yeah, so Thomas, do you want to explain, I think, the concept of substance use? How is coping and not really a choice? There's a lot of misconception when it comes to this. And which is why we also wanted to highlight addiction today. So Thomas, do you want to clarify this misconception for everyone here?
I think there's a lot of experts down here in terms of how you explain addiction medically. But to my experience is, I'm sort of like self-medicating because of my childhood. I'm self-medicating because I cannot live life on laughter. That's about all. It's about, you know, if you take substance out of my life and you did not replace anything, then I'll feel that God. I'm always thinking that why am I so different from the rest of the population? Until the day that I found myself. I thought I'm the only black sheep in the society. Until the day I realized I'm that black sheep among the herd that I found in peer support. We have our own fellowship of those 12-step fellowship. And when our first time I was being in a peer support group, I realized I'm not alone. I'm not so special at all. Unless you tell me the heroin that I use, the methamphetamine that I use must be special, must be different from other people, then that's really special. If the same drugs can give me the high, the solution should be the same as well.
So I think Thomas just explained the concept and the idea of substance use. Because he thinks there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding this, and how people think that it's a personal weakness, personal flaw, that kind of thing. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that, Thomas. Thanks for sharing your story with everyone here. I think it's very important. I think today we also, since we are at an anti-stigma conference, we also want to talk about how peer support and recovery can actually combat stigma and mental health stigma in society. So also address why peer support is important. Yeah. So I'm going to open this to all the panelists. You can talk about your experiences again in your unique settings. Maybe Geraldine, do you want to share how peer support, or even sharing when peers share their different strengths in an organization, how this contributes to reducing mental health stigma?
I was hoping when you asked the question, you don't call for my name.
I was planning to do that.
I feel that I'm probably the least experienced person in this area, but I'll just share with you, in my limited experience, what I benefited from. So in Oracle, since last year we started our wellness event. Last year we had it for 1 day, and this year we expanded it to 3 days because of the demand internally. So in this event, we have several tracks: physical, financial wellness, and of course, the most popular one is psychological wellness. And so I'd like to point out that this year we invited Deborah to be a speaker to share her experience. And she wasn't the only speaker. I think we had a privilege of having your psychiatrist there as well. Yeah, psychologist, yes. And of course, there was statistics shared in like 1 out of 7. It used to be 1 out of 8. Now 1 out of 7 people in Singapore face mental health condition at least one time in their life. And the statistics were a little bit disturbing, a bit concerning rather. But what really hit home was Deborah's personal sharing. I don't think it's an official peer support in that sense. However, just the personal sharing and vulnerability enabled the people in that class to share their personal struggle as well. Not necessarily around mental health. We have a colleague from the team that shared that the stigma is real. Her child has special needs. And it's a struggle to bring a child in a public place, especially in Singapore, whereby you don't see special needs people around. And probably something I can share now. My late brother had autism, and it was very difficult to bring him around in Singapore because people saw him differently, and you know how the society is not really accepting. Not because I can't blame them. I think we were just never brought up in a very high awareness environment. Yeah, so coming back to the story, when Deborah shared that, I really enable our company to talk about this topic. And this is absolutely something new. Oracle is 40 years, big US MNC, but in Singapore we're so behind. So not really peer support per se, but I think in a very intangible sense, just an opening of sharing and the beginning of conversation.
The sharing of lived experiences, which is what we're discussing today. The value of sharing lived experiences across sectors. So Geraldine talked about how it benefited people working in corporate sector. And I think this is very important because people working in corporate sectors are also very stressed. And we all have challenges in life. So like what Geraldine mentioned, it need not be just a mental health condition. But when one person starts to share and open up, you see how others start sharing and how Geraldine even shared about your personal experience, right? Yeah. So thank you for that. Yeah, sure.
So in Club Hill is the same thing. So the coming out of peers is very, very important because the more people speak up, then it demystifies mental illness. So to send a message to people out there that it's very common, it's not the disaster that people believe it to be. In fact, they can be blessings in disguise. So from our experience in Club Hill, we do this a lot through our publications, our books, our newsletters. To every talk that we give, when we're invited, we always bring along peers to share. And sometimes peers give the talk themselves. And even in helping our clients, new clients, caregivers, is very, really very, very important to involve peers in the process. So some of our counselors are in fact peers themselves, and our social workers too. So they have had lived experience and their contributions are immeasurable. So, in fact, so that's why we have more than a third of our staff are in fact peers.
Yeah, so you see how peers actually play many different roles. You don't need to just be a peer support specialist. So this really brings us to the next question about dual role. Okay? So, maybe Deborah, do you want to talk about dual role? How we can go beyond peer support itself, but also to contribute our other strengths and talents.
Okay, I would say that my core job is actually working in the corporate sector, so I actually feel a lot about the corporates. So what Geraldine shared earlier about the Wellness Day, where I was invited to share my recovery story there, I think it's really a breakthrough. Imagine it's like a super high disclosure, sharing right in front of all your colleagues. In fact, almost like my whole JPEG marketing team, they just came to support me, and it was very heartwarming for me. So sharing in front of them, suddenly I just felt that, hey, that stigma is gone, I'm not at all conscious about it, because in the first place, I told myself that the moment when I said that I want to be a campaign ambassador, that my face is going to be on the posters and the MRT greeting everybody, and all my colleagues will see it. And when I applied for the job, I actually included my entire mental health portfolio in my CV. Can you believe it? I took a 1-year break in 2017 after I graduated from the PSS course, so I was just doing volunteer work and all. And when my employer, when I was in the process of the job interview, I was so amazed that they look at the whole CV, they could see it, that, you're doing all this kind of stuff, it's mental health related. So do you have a lived experience? But they didn't even ask me a single question with regards to my condition. That was so shocking to me, and I wanted to talk about it. And I wanted to say, I'm an ambassador, it's going to be made known, right? And they said, yeah, great! And they even affirmed me of my strength and said, hey, this is so good, you're doing so much for the society. And I got a job. And when I came on board with that talk, I think that was, like I said, it's a breakthrough. And it is a reminder to myself that as a peer support specialist, being a mental health advocate, I have to be consistent in my life, because there are many pairs of eyes watching me. And that itself, I would say, is a motivation. It's an extra boost for me to sustain my wellness, because I have to be a living example. I have to model recovery. And I think that keeps me well. Yeah, so I think the dual role part is, with my expertise in the area of mental health, like I told Geraldine, let's bring the Beyond the Labor movement forward. Let's open up the conversations in Oracle, and I will do my best to support in inclusivity and everything. So I think that is the dual role part where we can value add in whichever place we are in.
Yeah. So not just peer support specialists only, but we all have different strengths and talents that we bring to the table. Right? Okay. Dr. Raja. Okay. This is going to be a bit personal because it will involve your caregiving experiences, and it's related to stigma within the community that you work in. So if you want to share anything about that?
Okay, as you know, stigma, I've shared my stories many times actually in books and newspapers. So I think some people know already my story, so maybe bear with me, I've heard all of it before. Stigma is mainly due to ignorance. So as my family, from the beginning when my sister first fell ill all those years ago, back in 1969, we were not ashamed, or we didn't try to hide it from anyone. We tried to do the right thing. And we thought the right thing to do was simply just to bring her to hospital and they'll fix the problem, but we didn't do more beyond that, We didn't understand what schizophrenia is. And back in 1969, there's no case managers coming to our homes to explain to us what it is. So all we did was, she's sick, send her to hospital. They would just give her the current, the ECT, and then in 5 weeks she'll be all right. So we tolerated her, and I think we contributed to her chronicity a lot. So this is why it is so, to me, education, understanding is very important. This is why peers have got to come out and help explain to families and caregivers the nature of the illness, just like you said, the nature of addiction, what is schizophrenia, what is bipolar. Then only can people understand and become better caregivers, give better support to people with mental health issues, and even take the step of, knowing what are the things that protects a person against falling in illness in the first place. So I think prevention is very important, but even if you do become unwell, recovery is always possible. So we learn a lot from mistakes. But I must say, since 2012 when Club Heal first started, I have learned so much from other caregivers, from the peers, and I became a caregiver to my sister in 2016 when her husband had to be placed in a nursing home. And then I actually learned a lot from my own sister. I thought I knew what it's like to be a caregiver. It is a 24-hour job, And then I realized, and I think I become better since 2016. Really developed me as a person. So I really have a lot to thank to all the peers and other caregivers and my community.
Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Anya. I think you brought up this point about how family caregivers play a very important role. You can contribute to the person's recovery, but you can also be the other side of it. Which I'll now move on to Thomas to talk about enabling. Yeah, this is the thing you mentioned that when the family is involved in addiction, it's hard for them sometimes to separate from the person in recovery, and then codependency comes about. So do you want to tell us a bit about this and maybe give one example?
Sure. Because in addiction, it is slightly different in terms of dealing with the person that is being affected with addiction. As a family member, I mean, when I look at my own siblings, my own mother, when they try their best to help, sometimes it becomes enabling me, and eventually it becomes a codependency. Because she, like my mother, she don't have control over my behavior, but yet she's trying her best to have a good outcome. And when the manipulative side of me, those kind of behavior that I presented, antisocial behavior. So many at times, she will get affected by, how I get my dough, how I get my money to finance all this. And when I look back, there's a lot of skill that she needs, and eventually she developed all these skills to prevent me to continue the road of destruction. And that part, that needs a lot of skill, a lot of training. And all this skill and training is not readily available elsewhere, except going into the support group, those family support groups, recovery support groups, where family members can actually support each other as well, sharing their life experience, living with a person with a mental health condition, addiction, even alcoholism. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Now we will discuss a bit about the role of peer support specialists and the work that we do. Because I think there is a lot of misconception surrounding this, a lot of things that people do not know is involved in peer support. Mimi, do you want to start?
Yes, so misconceptions about peer support. I think, let me gather my thoughts. Okay, so I think a lot of people, they have this idea that peer support specialists are befrienders. Like they're just sort of volunteers, saying hello and kind of like chatting up someone. This is not what we do. My phone.
That's the impact. This is not what we do.
And there are a lot of talks about how support specialists should be voluntary, then my question to you is, we have volunteer case managers, we have volunteer doctors, right? So I think it should be like recognized as professional. And that also another concern is that peer support has a vague professional like boundaries with people. I think, okay, so peer support is something new, it's something different, and a lot of what we do is very neutral on the same level. It's not one way, it's not paternalistic. So our boundaries may look different from a case manager's boundaries, a psychiatrist's boundaries, but we do have that kind, the emotional boundary, the professional boundary. There are certain things that we do not share, and we don't give out our personal numbers, things like that. We don't like, go like hang out on a Saturday night with our peers. I think this is like a big no-no. So we do have professional boundaries as well. Yeah, and also another thing that I wanted to raise is that like at this conference there are a lot of talks about peer support, and some people seem to think that there can be peer support amongst co-workers, amongst youths, which so the nature of that peer is not that common lived experience, but that they work in the same setting as co-workers. So I think it's to me it's more like a para-counselor kind of role, like for these peer supporters. But I think in my understanding of peer support specialists, and in this context that we're talking about in this workshop, we are talking about persons with lived experience intentionally sharing their lived experience with someone else, maybe a professional, maybe another person in recovery, about their lived experience to really support them.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about peer support as a discipline, which when you mention boundaries, there are ethics as well. And we learn this in our course. Yeah, so we don't just do it anyhow. Because it's someone's life, right? So that's his responsibility.
But having said that, I still feel like we're still very young, very good, like the nascent stage. There are still a lot more things that we need to hammer out. Really putting down like a proper ethical guideline as a community of peer specialists. I think that would be really important, like for the future in Deborah.
Yeah, which is why CPSS was started to establish and advance peer support, because there's a lot that needs to be done. Deborah, do you also want to say something about this?
Yeah, so peer support, just to conclude this part before we move on to the Q&A, because we're already short of time. So basically in peer support, some people would think that we would be in a position to advise peers, but that is actually strictly what we do not do. Basically, we are exploring options with peers, because actually we believe that within the peers themselves, they would know what works best for them. So perhaps in the conversation with them, we would maybe ask probing questions, open-ended questions, and guide them to explore what would work best for them. Yeah, so that is actually what we do, to empower them and not to take that power away from them. But in the process of the recovery journey, it is to tell them that there is someone by their side accompanying them and identifying ourselves with them in their struggles, because there could be similar struggles that when we share, they will know that, hey, I'm not alone in this. Someone else has actually journeyed ahead of me and overcome, so it's possible for me to do the same.
Yeah. So before we move into Q&A, one last closing question for the panelists. We will start with Sheldon. So what do you think it would take for the peer movement and even recovery movement to progress in Singapore? So what do you think needs to be done? Or maybe even what's your vision for recovery in Singapore?
Wow, that is a tough question.
And that's why it's the closing question.
Yeah, let me go first. What needs to be done to help the recovery journey?
Not just recovery journey, but the whole movement that we have in Singapore. So, the peer movement, peers coming up to share their lived experiences, taking on various roles, yeah.
I don't have a light bulb answer. I just feel that it's a lot about being vulnerable, being accepting and non-judgmental. I think we're in this pressure cooker in Singapore nowadays. Cost of living, just so cramped and everything that we don't have patience for anyone. If we could just continue that kampung spirit, just take a step back and realize there's, what's going to happen to you if you don't finish this task. If you just take a step back and, if you cannot meet your deadline at work, what's the worst thing that can happen to you? Well, if you don't spend just 5 minutes listening to someone who's struggling, a lot of bad things can happen to them. So I think just intrinsically be a bit more human. Yeah, so that's my view.
That's also our values. Yeah, so speaking of kampong spirit, Dr. Rania, what is your vision for like the peer movement or even recovery in Singapore?
Oh, vision. I think very important that we continue to get political support, funding support, and I think peers should lead in the drive against stigma. I think we're doing that in this conference. Peers are leading the drive against stigma, and even in healing and recovery roles, peers take the lead.
Thanks for sharing. Dr. Adrian, what do you think needs to be done?
I think hearing from surrounding Dr. Adrian, they spoke the important things. When I go to temple, when I go to CCs and community center, and as an expert, you stand up and talk about how common illnesses, what are the signs and symptoms of illnesses, and how do you seek help, what are the places to seek help, people listen. I don't know how much it changes the behavior and attitude. When I get my friends, Vijay, with a lived experience, or Ruth to come along with me, and when they come after me, it changes. People are attentive, they're listening, they stand up and they come and talk to us. Usually when I don't have them, currently we have maybe out of 10 talks, maybe 4 with the champions, patient expert, or lived experience. Other times we just go ourselves and I see the contrast difference. Peers have to lead the movement. I'm also a little worried about a lot of peer experts are sitting in hospital setting, Institute of Mental Health. I need to see them moving into primary care, polyclinics, so that we don't wait for people to have a lot of sufferings and a lot of experiences. We go early and go early intervention. We need to think about us how we're going to progress into the early intervention, bringing people early, going into videos.
So, Dr. Arya, you have brilliant points, but I think you brought up a very important point. The peer support needs to be everywhere. Right? In our communities, even with the police, everywhere, courts and all, everything. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to wrap up before we move to Q&A. Ying, not the same question. Okay, my question for you is: what is one line or one word that you have when it comes to recovery or peer support? What does it mean to you?
What does recovery and peer support mean to me? I'm a bit thrown now. Sorry, I was thinking about
Because it's not in the pen.
I think it's really a lot about being authentic and being willing to be vulnerable and being real and having like real talks to people, and you'll be surprised at how people reciprocate when they feel your sincerity. I think sometimes we live in a place where we have to show this very professional front, this perfect image of a good career, a wonderful family, or like a great personal life. But the truth of the matter is, everyone is a little bit broken in some sense, and I think on that front we can all stretch out our empathy and to really, feel with someone who is going through a bad day, who can't find a job, having problems with family members, and I think maybe this is what recovery is about, like being authentic and being the willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah, so one sentence, we give one paragraph, one page. But it shows, how much we have to talk about this, about maybe I'm just getting started. So Thomas, one sentence about how you feel, because we need to move into Q&A.
I guess being there, we don't have the solution, we don't have the answer, but being there with the peer, at least the person know that there's someone that care for them. Yeah. And a lot of people say authentic, being vulnerable.
Okay, my sentence done. No, but I mean the presence, right? That's important. So now we will open the Q&A. We don't have much time left. I know some people might have a lot of questions, but you can always approach us later. Okay? So we are going to open this to the floor. Any questions you have for any of our panelists here? Can we pass the mic around, please? June.